I'll start by asking, of course, your history so far is mostly in TV. I was wondering if it was always your intention to eventually get into film.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. I mean, I made sort of, short films and promos as well as I was going along, and always wanted to make a film. And I've been in development a few times, and if the process of development is kind of painful and often ends up with a few sort of empty promises, or it falls through naturally, or money isn't got, or the actor you had goes away. So there were several attempts where it came close, and then I was actually in development for a film when I was like, I've got to go away and make something. I'm getting frustrated. So this idea came about, and I did it.
And I mean, well, have you been back to direct any TV since? And if so, do you feel that you've kind of improved as a director?
I think I think I'm going to improve everything I do. Hopefully, I certainly learn a little bit each time. I mean, after I did this, I did Sherlock, which was a very different process, and I think there's two parts of. I mean, I see directing as a craft, not an art, and to me, it's more like being an architect or sort of a furniture craftsman, rather than a sort of living in isolation painting. So therefore you're reliant on other people, and you enjoy other people and their skills, which surpass yours in certain areas. And so Sherlock was very much about crafting, whereas this film was very much about the freedom of creation, because it didn't have characters that Benedict, Mark Gatiss, Stephen Moffat and Conan Doyle had created, and Martin and so on. So whereas this was much more freeing. So I think you always bring something from your past experience into whatever you're doing, obviously. So I hope that benefits rather than cripples.
And I mean, In Fear is very unique in the sense that you didn't really give the characters any scripts to work with. It was you sort of let them know sort of brief plot points. Is that right? Yeah,
I mean, I didn't. I mean, it's a device that's used for drama a lot. I think it's obviously we've got. I mean, someone like Ken Loach has been doing it for many years. And there's a lot of drama you get which use that technique, but it tends to be relationship dramas or sort of crisis dramas. And what I want to do was a genre film that still used that technique. So what it meant was I had to have scenes which had a genre beat or a genre moment, an event that was within it, but at the same time I wanted the relationship to have the freedom of improvisation. And more importantly, the fact that the characters didn't know the story. So they had no idea, whether they were going to live or die. And what that meant was that they were tense all the time, and they had to find who they could trust, or whether they could even trust themselves, because I could have switched the action totally and they would have not been prepared for it. So I think that was something I always wanted to try, and I'd done it with a TV movie many years before, which didn't really work. Going back, to your question, did I learn? Because that time I made mistakes, which was kind of imposing too much on the characters, rather than knowing the story and letting the characters evolve within the story. And so, it was something that I'm kind of really excited about doing.
And did that freedom extend to yourself? Because obviously the actor, you were able just to change it up for the actor's kind of benefit. But were you able to was the story able to influence you? Were you able to say, well, I might change this or change that? Was the narrative always the same, or did you kind of play with it a little?
I knew how it was going to end. I knew what I wanted, and I knew where I wanted the characters to be, but I didn't know the journey there. So in that way, without sounding totally ridiculous, it was kind of an exercise in predestination. I wanted to put myself in the position of God with the actors, where I could say, I know where you're going to go, but I don't know how you're going to get there. And what that meant was I did have to adapt a lot, and emotionally they were in control. So if they hit a certain pitch, I then had to recalibrate. So that meant reinventing certain aspects of the story according to where they were emotionally. But the events that took place were, some of them were dangerous, so we had stuntmen, so that was set in stone. Others we rigged up, they were very harmless, but they provided shocks. And some of those we jettisoned along the way. Other ones we invented, we were like, we need something else. So yes, we kept manipulating the story, is probably the right word.
And are you surprised this is a technique that isn't used more often in kind of horror, thrillers, or movies, because it provokes genuine fear, doesn't it? For the actors?
I think, I mean, you know, it is. I think, yes, I am surprised. I genuinely surprised by that. I mean, I think, you know, it is used in quite a lot of. You know, there are horror movies where they have used it. I mean, you know, Cannibal Holocaust was probably the first sort of free attempt, and you know, that's really gruesome because, I mean, Punishment Park, not a horror, but that, you know, they're in the sort of late 60s into the 70s, there was more freedom about filming, I think, and probably a lot to do with the way films are financed. And even films like Deliverance or Southern Comfort, there'd be more freedom in that than there was in Platoon or, you know, Full Metal Jacket, the equivalent. But most directors try it, but I think if the script has to be financed, and when you hit a certain level of finance, you can't, you know, play with the script as much, I think is the truth.
So did you find it quite difficult to get that kind of finance, in the sense that you didn't have a real kind of hard copy script to work with?
I think, I mean, incorporating what you just said as well, I think the fear was genuine, and in the way we did it without the script meant the fear was absolutely genuine, and they were, you know, authentically scared by what was going to happen and tense. And I think the financiers anticipated that would be the case because they were like, oh, that's going to be exciting. You know, Blair Witch did it to, you know, obviously, you know, success. And this is very different than Blair Witch and is more, you know, it is very, very different. But I think there's precedent where you go, okay, I can understand it's going to work, but it's quite a large risk, so I'm going to give you this amount of money. If I give you more money than that, I need to see a script. So I think they bought into the idea at a certain financial level, and they were comfortable at that level. So that meant we had to make certain choices in how we filmed it, where we filmed it, according to the fact that they had invested a certain amount, which was based on the fact they thought we could achieve what we wanted without losing, you know, them too much money.
And were there any days when you just completely backfired and you wanted a particular response from the actors and it just went the other way and you had to say, cut, I actually have to tell you how to do this one?
Yeah, definitely. Well, actually, there were three occasions we went disastrously wrong, which were, one was because they anticipated it. Or, well, no, actually, one, they just didn't care. You know, I threw a branch at the car and they were in the middle of an open space and they literally just sort of looked at the roof and like, yeah. And then another one was they drove off on their own and we'd rigged the car with cameras. It was something I always wanted to do, but we didn't. The Alexa were just developing a small camera at that point and the prototype was Prometheus and they overran with it, so we didn't get to use it. So we didn't quite have the technology to just set them off on their own, but we did it on one occasion with two cannons rigged on the dashboard. And they drove for 2 hours because I forgot to say you better be back in half an hour. The tar burst, it was extraordinary. It's an amazing bit of footage, but they are in character, but it didn't fit. And so that was the opposite of it, which was frustrating, where it just didn't work with what I was engineering with. Is it an external force? Is it something that they're creating themselves? There was another one where a voice came over on the walkie-talkie cueing something to happen, and they heard the cue on the walkie-talkie, so they looked at the walkie-talkie rather than what was going to happen. So there were quite a lot. You know, we got 45 hours of footage, so there's a lot of scares or jumps that don't make it. And that was often because they preempted it or they were just bored by it.
So a lot for the DVD extras then?
Yeah, or maybe they weren't even good enough for that, so, you know.
I mean, because it is genuinely petrifying. I mean, well, maybe not necessarily petrifying, but very tense, very suspenseful. It must have been great fun for you as a director to have that license to scare and to play with the audience perceptions. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, it really was. I mean, I think, I wanted to make... Suspense is the right word. It was deliberately not I didn't want to make it a sort of, it wasn't going to be gory, it wasn't going to be, jump scares beyond some, sort of necessity, but I wanted them to come from the situation. The choices that are made are from the character. The whole thing is actually a construct. It's not from me. Everything's in the titles. If you stop and you look at the titles, it shows everything being made. So all that is the whole thing is an artifice, and it gave me the freedom to play with their mind. And once I got excited by the way the actors were unravelling, their minds were unravelling, and I could see that fear becoming very real. And it was dictating how they were going to respond in any given situation. That excited me because I thought it would translate to an audience.
Yeah, so it's pretty important that people check user reviews on TripAdvisor and stuff, isn't it, when they want to go on holiday?
I think so. Yeah, I guess it. Just ignore all. Just go for it. Yeah, I say the opposite. Just go and risk it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you.
Much
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.